All right, and welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be starting Unit 8, the Cold War, post-World War II unit. This is going to be Lesson 3. Remember last lesson, we'd been talking about the Korean War. And now Lesson 3, this is the Cold War Intensifies, where we'll be talking about the space race and the arms race. Make sure to write down your essential question in your notes right now. How did the Cold War intensify? How did it get bigger during the 1950s? And pictured here is a bomb shelter. These were very common in the 50s, as many Americans feared of an imminent nuclear attack by the Soviet Union. All right, remember to pause if you need more time to write your heading. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were by far the two superpowers of the world. The conflicting ideologies, for the Soviet Union, here's their bear, here's their hammer and sickle. Their idea is communism, that the government should be in charge of everything and everybody. Total domination of the government. Now, communism itself is the idea of the workers, being united and treated equally, but in reality, it was a dictatorship. Okay, that is their ideology, communism, versus our ideology. There's Uncle Sam, there's the American flag. Our idea is about democracy, people having a say in their government, and capitalism, the free market, businesses being free. Obviously, these two ideologies butt heads, and this is at the center of the Cold War conflict. Our way of doing things, democracy, versus the communist Soviet way of doing things. The goals of these rival nations led to a worldwide struggle for influence called the Cold War. The policies followed by the two superpowers would help shape the history of the 20th century for much of the world, from Latin America to the Middle East. The Cold War is going to last from the end of World War II in 1945 all the way until 1990. And like I've said, in many ways, it is still being fought today. All right, so the Cold War is on. And it is not called a Cold War because it was cold temperature-wise. It's called a Cold War because it's a different, a new kind of warfare where we're not constantly, pew, pew, pew. We're not constantly firing and shooting at each other because we can't, because the weapons have now become so destructive that if we go all out frontal assault against each other, we will destroy the world. Nuclear weapons. So you can't do that. You can't use those weapons because everything would be destroyed. So you have to find new ways to fight each other. This could be through puppet wars, proxy wars, where, we have some of our smaller friend nations, fight each other. We give supplies and some assistance. We'll see that in like Korea and Vietnam and so on. Or this could be a constant struggle over influence, spreading our money, our businesses, our ideas over to places, the Soviet Union spreading theirs. But we don't want to all out go to war because it could be so destructive. And so let's talk about that destructive capability, the nuclear weapons. Remember that the first nuclear program began in the United States during World War II, started by the theoretical ideas of the noted Jewish German physicist Albert Einstein. FDR is going to put together the Manhattan Project to build the bomb, top secret government project to build the atomic bomb during World War II. And it was shortly after FDR's death in 1945 when the first successful testing went off at Trinity Project. And we are going to use those two atomic bombs. Remember, the next president, Harry Truman, uses those atomic bombs to end the war against Japan. We drop one on August 6, 1945 on Hiroshima. The Japanese still refuse to surrender, so we drop a second one on August 9th, 1945 in Nagasaki. And finally, the Japanese surrender. And that brings World War II to a close. But it did more than that. Because when we dropped these atomic bombs at Japan, we showed the world this new terrible weapon. We made it, now the whole world could see the power of nuclear technology, the power from literally harnessing the sun. Remember, nuclear technology, it works the same way, the same chain reactions that go off in the sun, where atoms are fusing together or splitting apart. It's called fission. That technology is what's used to create these bombs. It's the power of the sun, nuclear weapons. And when we use those in August 1945, Stalin's going to want to get a set of his own. And so there will be many Russian spies in the United States, even infiltrating the Manhattan Project, desperate to get a hold of our nuclear secrets. And by 1949, the Russians will have our nuclear secrets and they will have successfully detonated their first atomic test. So by 1949, we are not the only nation in the world that has nuclear weapons. Russia does as well. The Soviet Union now is a nuclear power. Now in China, remember that you'd had before World War II, the nationalist forces under Chiang Kai-shek battling against the communist forces under Mao Zedong, okay? Then the Japanese took China over. We helped to liberate China from the Japanese. But then at the end of the war, in came the Russians in the northern part of China. And then you had Russia occupying the northern part of the Korean Peninsula, kind of influencing those areas and making them more communist. And by 1949, the communist forces of China, led by Mao Zedong, will come out on top and prevail. The nationalist forces under Chiang Kai-shek that America had been supporting under like the Truman administration, they will flee to this island called Formosa, which will become the Republic of China. Today, it is betterwise known as the nation of Taiwan. And so that is the history we talked about in lesson 2. So remember that in 1949, this is a really bad year for the United States. Not only did Russia get their hands on the atomic bomb, and now, you know, we have to contend with our enemy in the Cold War having nuclear capabilities just as we do. But the other really terrible thing that happened in 1949 was that China, great big China, became communist. And this just looks like, you know, now most of Asia is communist. What's next? Is the whole world going to become red? Is the whole world going to be taken over by communism? 1949 was a bad year. And so this is when the arms race is really going to pick up. The arms race is the competition, only the stakes are really high, between us and the Soviet Union over who has the most and the most powerful nuclear weapons. Okay, this is where we're going to go from atomic weapons, like we had to end the Second World War, the ones that we dropped on Japan, atomic weapons. These are weapons capable of one bomb destroying an entire city. We're going to go from that to hydrogen weapons. And hydrogen nuclear weapons are 100, sometimes 1,000 times more powerful than atomic bombs. Okay, hydrogen bombs, where an atomic bomb is capable of destroying a city like Hiroshima or Nagasaki, a hydrogen bomb is capable of destroying a state, a small state, a region, okay? Hydrogen bombs are devastating. We did the first testing on these small atolls, these tiny islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far, far away from everybody else, although not some Pacific Islanders who will be feeling radiation, fallout, and side effects for many years to come. But the very first testing was on Bikini Atoll, Bikini Island. We blew up the island with the first hydrogen testing. And when news of the hydrogen test went out, there was a Parisian fashion designer who, I'm not kidding, literally will use the name of that island for his new 2-piece bathing suit. So you're welcome. There you go. That's the name of the bikini. That's where it comes from. But yeah, by 1953, the Soviet Union will have also detonated their first successful H-bomb, their first hydrogen bomb. They did most of their testing underground or in Siberia. Remember, that's far northern Russia. So going into the 1950s, both the United States and the Soviet Union are each going to be building these new hydrogen bombs, and we're going to be building thousands of them. This is the arms race. We are desperate to have stronger weapons and more of them than the Soviets, because we feared that we would be at a disadvantage if they surpassed us in this weapons race. If they had more weapons than us or more powerful weapons than us, then they would hold the advantage. And whoever holds the advantage can threaten the other, okay? This is about domination in this Cold War, okay? And this is where new terms start to take over, such as MAD. MAD stands for Mutually Assured Destruction. The idea that if we can keep pace with one another in the arms race, if both of us have about equal the number of nuclear weapons, neither side can threaten the other. We can kind of keep each other in balance, because we can't attack the Soviet Union for fear that they would attack us. They can't attack us for fear that we would attack them. If either of us try to attack each other, everybody's going to die. Mutually assured destruction. Everybody would be destroyed. This is why we're going to not attack each other, and we can actually keep the world in balance and safe by keeping our arsenals about equal. This is mad. And it is also crazy. Yes, it is mad. If it sounds like this is crazy stuff, yes, but this is what the world was led by. This is what the world is still guided by today. that we are in balance nuclear in nuclear capabilities, so that no one side has the advantage. This keeps everybody from not firing. Okay. And you could see here, there were drills in schools in the 1950s. My dad was he was a little kid in the 1950s. He told me that they used to do these too. But they would have nuclear drills in schools where kids would hide under their desk for like the events of a nuclear holocaust, that the Soviet Union had, deployed a nuclear weapon to the United States. Kids would hide under their desks. Not that it would do you a lot of good, but you're not going to tell an 8-year-old that, right? And remember, there were some survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You just had to be on the very edges of the city and away from most of the major fallout. But this was a very scary time period, a lot of uncertainty. We live in the nuclear age today, where we know that at any moment, everything we know, everything we see, everything that's been our reality since we were born could suddenly be evaporated by a nuclear weapon. That the world has these capabilities. We've grown up today being so used to that idea that it's not really as frightening as it probably should be, because the world has been in balance for so long with these nuclear powers holding each other in check, that we don't fear that happening like tomorrow. Every now and then there's a rogue nation, a smaller state that is not as, as balanced as like a world power. I'm talking about dictatorships like North Korea, whatnot. They get their hands on these nuclear weapons, and it is frightening. It should be scary. But this was certainly a very new and very scary concept to Americans living in the 1950s. What's the message behind this cartoon? You can see here's the planet Earth, and it's being squished between this arms race, this race for nuclear weapons between the United States bombs and the Soviet Union's bombs that basically were destroying the planet. We have the capabilities to destroy the planet many, many times over. Nuclear warhead proliferation. Proliferation means the expansion of the development of nuclear weapons. You could see that the United States from 1945 to 1965, in those 20 years, we had by far the most nuclear weapons. You could see in second place was Russia, the Soviet Union. You could see in third place was Britain, and then France and China. Today, actually, Russia has even more nuclear weapons than we do. You could see that the cost of nuclear weapons was in the trillions, okay? Trillions and trillions of dollars spent on this arms race so that we would have the advantage in the Cold War. There's Bert the Turtle. This was basically a informational cartoon for children to watch to prepare them for the event of a nuclear attack. In 1952, in the presidential race, remember that Harry Truman had served out the rest of FDR's 4th term in office. Remember, FDR had continued to be elected 4 times. And then Truman served out his last term, ended World War II, set up the containment policy to guide us through the Cold War, led us through most of the Korean War. And now Truman is stepping down. And in 1952, former World War II General and Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower is going to run as the Republican for president and beat Adlai Stevenson, the Democrat. And so our general, the guy who planned D-Day, Dwight Eisenhower, is now president. He had a nickname, Ike. He had a very, very nice demeanor, very kind of friendly. He's kind of like a grandfather figure to the to Americans, sort of like FDR. And so everybody likes Ike, okay? Eisenhower will be enormously popular. And remember, he is a big hero because of D-Day from World War II. So now he's our president, President Eisenhower, Republican, elected in 1952. He's going to serve from 1953 to 1960, actually 1961, when Kennedy gets sworn in. But Eisenhower is going to be leading us through this next stage in the Cold War. Eisenhower. And Eisenhower will be the president to create the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. This is our spy agency, okay? These are the information data collector people. And that's what spies do. Really, a lot of it today is behind computers. They're analysts, okay? They are interested in collecting information from all around the world and then deciding, you know, how best to spread America's influence. And Eisenhower will use the CIA pretty strategically and importantly several times in the 1950s to overthrow governments that the United States did not like. This will notably be in like Cuba with what's going to go on with the Cuban Revolution. This is how Fidel Castro eventually is going to come to power in 1959. And this is also going to be in Iran. Iran's going to be a country we're going to be talking a lot more about as we move forward in this class. But in the 1950s, Eisenhower actually orders the CIA to overthrow the democratically elected leader of Iran. And our spies, the CIA, they're going to be in competition against the Russian spy agency known as the KGB. Interestingly enough, the current and long-serving president/dictator of the Soviet Union, named Vladimir Putin, he was a former KGB agent. All right, last thing in our notes today for part 1 of lesson 3 here. Eisenhower is going to respond pretty aggressively to the Soviet Union's arms race, and he crafts his own theory about the Cold War and how America should behave based on what he calls the domino effect. And so remember, Truman Doctrine was about containment, stopping the spread of communism by whatever means necessary. Eisenhower Doctrine is going to be based on brinkmanship, mass retaliation, mad theory, and it's all centered around this domino effect. So I'm going to go through each of these things and explain what they're talking about. And a lot of these ideas also, keep in mind, were crafted, you know, by President Eisenhower, but mostly under the advisement of his Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. All right, so domino effect refers to the idea that if one country falls to communism, all the surrounding nations will as well, like a series of dominoes. You stack them up, you hit the first one, and then all the rest just come down. Okay, if like China falls to communism, which it did in 1949, then you're going to have like Southeast Asia fall to communism. Vietnam will fall, Laos will fall, Cambodia will fall, Myanmar will fall, then India could fall, and then all of Asia could fall, and then Africa, and then so on. And so this is the domino effect, that we cannot allow one country to fall to communism because surrounding nations would then as well. In the nuclear buildup, in the arms race, the race for nuclear weapons and supremacy, massive retaliation is about mutually assured destruction, mad theory, that basically neither side can attack the other for fear that everything would be destroyed, okay? And so you basically, you let the other side know, we're gonna let the Soviet Union know that if they attack the United States, if they attack our homes, if they attack anywhere in our country, they will be met with overwhelming force, with massive retaliation, with a nuclear bomb, in other words. That is massive retaliation. Don't mess with us or you will get nuked. And brinkmanship is the idea that we have to be willing to put our thumb on that red button, that launch button, and say we will use nuclear weapons and not blink. It's like almost like playing chicken with the Soviet Union. They have to believe that we will use these weapons, even if we know that the effects would be devastating. Even if we know that if we use these weapons, they will use theirs. We have to be willing and show that we are ready to use them. And hopefully the idea is that because we're willing to show that we'll go to the brink of war without actually going and using these weapons, that they will also not actually use these weapons, that will hold each other in check, okay? So this is brinkmanship. The idea that you go to the edge, the brink of war, but you don't actually press the button, you just threaten to, okay? Joseph Stalin, there he is, preserved behind glass. He will finally die in 1953. He was not assassinated, the dictator of the Soviet Union. He dies, I think, of a heart attack or something. And then after Stalin dies, we think we're gonna have it a little bit better because, you know, who could be worse than the mass murdering sociopath that was Joseph Stalin? And in comes this new guy named Nikita Khrushchev. And it looks like he's going to be better. He was much more salt of the earth, you know, former World War II, you know, leader and stuff. And Nikita Khrushchev seems like he'd be more reasonable, but pretty early on, we're going to see that he's going to meet anybody who tries to escape the Soviet Union like those Eastern European satellite nations, with force. And he's not going to be such a nice guy. And so we will stop there with a new leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, and with our President Eisenhower willing to go to the brink of nuclear warfare using our giant nuclear arsenal that we've gotten from our arms race.